What's up, everybody? Let me fix the screen, bring that down just a touch. Yeah, that's cool. As always, if you guys wouldn't mind, chime in and start us off just letting me know that you can hear and see me, so that I know that I'm not talking to my computer screen alone. Sergio, thank you. Paul, great to see both of you. Thank you, guys. All right. Helma, what's up? Michael, Nashville on. This is my favorite part, I think, of the whole PDF study guide this month was that dyad riff from the dyads from the triad pairs. The example over, what's the name of this tune? Days of Wine and Roses. Whew, that. Voice sitting between those dyads into from the B flat, minor major 9 down into the A minor. So pretty. Answer questions if you guys got them. Miguel, hey. Brent, great to see you. Steven, hello. Sean, midnight over there, man. Appreciate you hanging with us. Glad you can make it. I hope today's Sunday. I guess it's Sunday. It's midnight for you Sunday going into Monday, so hopefully you don't have anything too early in the morning tomorrow. Haven't even gotten a question yet. Who's got questions? Otherwise I can practice. I know somebody had a question. Somebody was asking something. Was it Dickie that posted something in Facebook? I'm going to wait and make sure he's on here before we talk about that. And then someone else, I think it was Sergio. Was it you who was asking something in the underground about the fully extended pianistic voicings? Remind me. Let me know. I think I looked at it and the first voicing made total sense, and I can talk about it. The second one I tried to play, And I don't know how you would have reached that, man. You must have giant hands, because I could not pull. I'm trying to remember what the lower three notes were. You'll have to type it back out for me. I don't know if it was a typo or if you just really have that good of a reach. Yeah, Brian, what's up, man? Good to see you. All right, Miguel. Could go a bit over the minor blues and tonalities to use over that. So, this was something I was going to talk with Dickie about, assuming he shows up, because he was asking Sean about it in the Facebook group with that video of Tenor Madness and all that chromaticism. So there's basically two ways that I think about applying tonalities and melodic triads to tunes. There's really more than two, but there's two basic, simple, easy to understand ways. One is just harmonic. Like any tonality that we know that works over a given chord for a certain type of function, if we see that chord in a tune, we can use any tonality we know that works for it. So a quick example might be C minor blues, right? Like a Mr. PC type chord progression we go. So the first chord, we're kind of like freeze framing things. We're pausing them in the middle of time so that we can kind of examine what's happening in them. So let's pretend like the very first chord is our minor 11-9, C minor 11-9. Okay, that gives us our primary quadratonic, which is B flat tension 4. It gives us a really straight ahead melodic triad bebop scale. It's the same one that we would use for a bunch of other tonalities. It's basically B flat major, tension 2, 4, and 6. So it's the same one that I would use for just a pure B flat, like a B flat 6 chord. It's the same one we would use for an E flat major 9 chord. We start to get a lot more overlap when we add more notes. Okay, that would be our melodic triad bebop scale for that. Now that works for this chord, and we could theoretically use minor 11-9 when we go to the F, the 4 chord. Right? This gives like a very kind of hip, open, modal, herby, modern kind of a vibe. So if I was playing, maybe I'll do, just because it's better for the loop, it's still the same chord progression, but now Mr. PC was the name of it, Equinox. Going to do the first 8 bars, Miguel. We can talk about the last turnaround at the end, but just to see how many harmonic options we have at our disposal. So I can use minor 11-9 for each of these, which would be B flat tension 4 to E flat tension 4. It just gets us right inside this very cool sound. Now, instead of minor 11-9, maybe we want minor 9. think you were, you've been with us since the beginning. So for those of you who may have missed the minor 9, which we're going to come back to at some point, we did it before our big format shift. Minor 9 is a minor triad built on the 5th of a chord. So C minor 7 would be a G minor triad. When we go to F minor, it's going to be a C minor triad. Let me think about this for a second. Yeah, that was right. It's just, I guess the natural 6 is a funny sound to hear. Right, very different from the minor 11/9 sound. Just trying to pause it in the middle, and now it's not letting me. I wanted to hear that turnaround. Come on, dude. You gotta be kidding me. Thank you. So that's kind of one conceptual idea, is just any tonality we know that works for a minor chord, we can use for this. So we can kind of mix and match. They're just like little puzzle pieces. The other approach that I'm a big fan of using is actually just looking at the melody of the tune we're working on. Okay, it's one thing to play around with the harmony. It's a whole other art form when we start thinking about what the melody of the tune is, because not all minor blues are the same. So it's really helpful to look and see what Coltrane was hearing in his mind when he wrote this particular tune. So let's just quickly look at a couple of them to give you some ideas, and then we'll wrap up with some approaches to the 2/5 at the end, or the turnaround at the end, we could say. Hey, what's up, Kurt? Good to see you. Francesco, what's up, man? Sergio, I'm going to try that chord out in a minute. It looks interesting. I want to give that a shot. All right, Mr. PC starts at C minor. C minor triad. C minor triad with 2 passing tones, right? Tension 2 and tension 4. There's our tension flat 7, which, if you know me, if you've been with us for a while, you know that I very often try and avoid any kind of tension 7, especially flat 7, but it is allowable. And the other thing to remember is that if you listen to the band, the bass player is dropping down to B flat, right? McCoy Tyner's playing a B flat chord there. It's not really a B flat over C minor. The whole band kind of shifts from C minor down to a B flat chord. So even though I guarantee you Coltrane is not sitting around talking about and thinking about the specific concepts that I'm always, pressing, he's using this B flat note, this tension flat 7, but he's still kind of working around by using it within the harmony rather than applying it just over C minor. Okay. What's really interesting is that we could argue that one of the triad pair options for us is C minor and B flat for a C minor chord. Normally I would do D minor, because that would give us the A natural, the really pretty natural 6. But we could theoretically use the B flat triad, which would give us the flat 7 instead. just kind of all related. When he goes to the F minor chord, again, F minor triad with a tension 2 and a tension 4. These are our go-to pentatonic scales for these two chords, following the hierarchy of harmonic importance. If we're playing pure C minor over a C minor or C minor 7 chord, right? Our primary tension is 2. Secondary tension is tension 4. Put that together and you get triad tension 2 and 4, which is his melody. So obviously that's what I would use for Mr. PC. The turnaround, if we're following the melody, which is what I'm talking about now, as opposed to just playing harmony, we can play around with the harmony by pulling out the exact chords that we want to use and just applying tonalities that we know. But if we're looking at the melody, he's not playing the changes in the melody. That, to me, to my ear, is a great example of a condensed melodic progression, meaning he's playing one triad over a series of moving chords. And in this case, he's just using C minor over that whole thing. Okay? If you've been with us long enough to have worked with any of the rules when we're using a minor triad for our melodic triad, you know that anytime we have melodic triad with a tension 4, a minor triad with a tension 4, we also get sharp 4 or flat 5, the blue note. So if we're playing C minor with a tension 4, which we're totally allowed to do, right, there's tension 4. It's just assumed that we can also add tension sharp 4. Which is what his melody is over that final section. Okay, so for me, this whole tune, the melodic progression, would be C minor, tension 2, tension 2, 4, however you want to approach it. You could also do the bebop scale with our 6 notes. Tension C minor, tension 2 for 4 bars, F minor, tension 2 for 2 bars, back to C minor, and then the whole turnaround is just our C minor sort of blue triad sound. Okay. John, what's up, man? Kurt. Kurt, you chimed in a little bit ago. I said hello. John, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. We're just talking about some minor blues options. So I hope that analysis makes sense, Miguel. Contrary, slightly different would be a tune like Equinox. He usually plays it, I think the original was in C sharp, but I'm going to drop it down a half step to C minor so that we can see how it relates to this chord. In Equinox, the melody is really, really, really simple. It's just 2 notes from C minor triad. No passing tones, no chromaticism, no tension notes, just when it goes to the F chord, the 4, 2 notes from F minor triad. Back to C minor. Now here's where it changes. Okay. We could argue that it's still just the C minor triad like we did in Mr. PC, but I treat it differently here. When it goes to the flat 6 chord, the melody goes to that D note. Right, there's flat 6 to the dominant, all with the D note in the melody. steps back up into the C minor triad. So we could argue that that D note is just tension 2 against the C minor triad. And we could just play a C minor triad. Great way to play over it. To me, I think because I'm always looking for more colors and textures and movement, this is an option. And it's the same thing we were talking about for Mr. PC. But to me, as soon as I hear that flat 6 with the sharp 11 on top, I'm just craving this. Which is our 13 sharp 11 9. Okay. Again, this is one of those things, if you haven't worked on the tonality, just don't worry about it. Just use a basic C minor, it'll still work. But I want to hear this D note tonicized. I don't want it to be a tension note. I have the ability to treat it as a tension note like I was just playing with a minute ago. Tension 2 wanting to come back to C. But this way I can actually make the C and the E flat note the tension notes that want to pull us back to D. So I can make the centerpiece of this section of the tune the D note, which is what's happening in the melody for me. That's how I interpret it. Right? So this is a B flat major triad over A flat 7. Primary tension would be B flat tension 2. These are our 3-note quadratonic voicings. I'm just putting them over a G flat note because that's the dominant 7, the flat 7 in this chord. And then when that flat 6 resolves down to the dominant, now we have a dominant chord with a D note on top. So now we would probably want to pick a new, we could still use B flat major, but I would probably move to a different triad for this. Even something as simple as G major triad root structure. Sounds too simplistic, but I don't know if I love the sound of that, but let's see what it sounds like in the progression. Not really feeling that at the moment. Let's see what else we got in our arsenal with the D note. At the moment, my ear is kind of gravitating towards a 7 sharp 9 using a G minor triad. G minor triad over G7. So I'm actually tonicizing the sharp 9, and then I'm using that's B flat or A sharp, and then I'm using the B natural as my tension note. then that resolves us back to C minor. I know that was a lot of information. Let me slow that back down real quick. A flat 7, I'm thinking of as a B flat tension 2. Got some other great tension notes we can use in there, but the primary is tension 2. To G7, I think I was using, what did I say, G minor tension natural 3. And then when we go back to C minor, just pure C minor, tension 2. With other tension notes allowable, obviously. So this is quite different from Mr. PC. Mr. PC is so clearly, so obviously C minor tension 4. With Equinox, there's a couple more options, right? The first 8 bars are obviously just pure root structure triads, but the turnaround can be treated the same way or it can be different. I'm trying to think if there's any other minor blues that are coming to mind. So Kurt's tune, literally just called Minor Blues, that little vamp that they play on, they're literally playing an E flat minor tension 2 quadratonic. Root 5th, tension 2 up to 3, 2, 5, 1. Right, that's actually, we don't know, this isn't the melody, so we don't know that this is going to be the sort of tonality we're working with, but this is the vamp, which is really more of like a left hand idea. He's outlining the harmony, but it's not an E flat. It's not an E flat minor 7 arpeggio. It's not an E flat minor 6. Right, he's not bringing that 6 flavor, and he's not bringing flat 7. There's no flat. It's just an E flat minor triad with a tension 2. Again, I can guarantee you he's not sitting around talking about words like quadratonics and stuff like that. I've hung out with him. Like, that's not part of his vocabulary of how he speaks about what he does, but he still has incredibly massive ears and is trying to find the prettiest notes, just like all of us are trying to find. So his ears are going to bring him to the same place our ears will bring us if we're really paying attention and listening to how these notes move. Not that there's anything wrong with minor 6 and minor 7 arpeggios. That's like the standard protocol that we're told to start with. But the more we really look at the music, those elements are there sometimes, but there's so much else happening. And very often it's just something like this, where it's a triad or a triad with a single tension note. I'm trying to remember what his melody is on that tune. Connection is unstable. I think I may have froze for a second. Hopefully you guys are still with me. Gone for a second. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it gave me a little warning thing, but I'm glad we're back. Right, listen to how simple that melody is. It's like stupid simple. And we can argue there's different ways that this could be interpreted. This could be E flat minor with a tension 4. And he's just sitting and letting that tension 4 kind of mess with the vibe to keep things ungrounded. Shouldn't be worried worry about that. I was trying to see if I could play the melody and keep that vamp going at the same time. It doesn't really matter. So one way to interpret that is E flat minor with a tension 4, which is our secondary tension note for an E flat minor triad. So we could either use E flat minor tension 2 or tension 4, just like Coltrane was doing in Mr. PC. It's the same exact sequence of notes. Completely different vibe. It's got Rosenwinkel written all over it. It doesn't sound anything like Coltrane, but he's using the same series of notes. Or another way we could think of it is that this note, this A flat, is not a tension note, but it's actually the stable note. We can pick and choose what we want and how we hear it, right? Miguel, you might hear it differently than I hear it. We might decide that we want that note to be a strong, stable, consonant note in our melody. So if that's the case, instead of using E flat minor, we would want to pick a triad that this note is inside of and treat the other two notes as tensions above it and below it. This is the 11, so I'm going to jump straight from my minor 11-9. This sounds really pretty to me. It doesn't feel like I'm playing the tune at the moment. So I wouldn't use this as my primary sound, but it's in my bag of tricks now. I know that it's a possibility. So I'm going to go back and try out the E flat minor triad instead. That feels much more proper to me for this tune. So I'm using tension 2 and tension 4. Here's tension sharp 4. Now I'm playing the whole bebop scale. A lot of trying bebop scale 2, 4, and 6. Tension 2. If you haven't gotten this far in any of our PDF study guides yet, that last thing I was playing was just our quadratonic arpeggio, starting on the tension, sweeping through a triad. I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope that gave a little bit of insight. One way is just to think about chord by chord, like what's happening at. And an extension of that is to think about the condensed version, like using one triad to play over multiple chords. And then the other side of that is to analyze the melody. So not to worry about the harmony so much, but to actually look at what Kurt or Coltrane or whoever, to look at what their melody is. What did they write over it? Chances are good if you look at their melody and find the triads that it seems like they're using, and then you go and transcribes some of their solo, you're probably going to find that their ear is gravitating towards certain phrases in their solo that are going to line up with the melody that they wrote. Because we're all working ultimately from our ears. So even if they're playing scalar ideas and arpeggios, they're likely going to gravitate towards the sounds that they were hearing when they wrote the tune. Because that's the whole point of writing tunes, is to bring something new out. Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk, Miles, Coltrane, Kurt, like nobody writes tunes just so that they have a basic chord progression that they can run 1, 3, 5, 7 over. Like that's not the art form of jazz composition. We write tunes because we want to create a new story, a new personality, a new framework. And then the improvisation, when done really well and artistically, takes place inside of that plot. So very often you'll see great composers and improvisers kind of improvising in a way that's really respectful of the tune, even if they're not doing it with the same vocabulary and terminology that I'm always harping on. Miguel, great explanation. Playing as always. Yeah, you're welcome. Last point I'll make is that the condensed thing can be used even when the melody's not doing it. So like with Mr. PC, just the first 8 bars again. I can use C minor over this whole thing, even when it goes to F minor. I can still play a C minor triad because they're in the same key. It doesn't always work this way if we're like full blown moving to a different key. I'm not outlining anything. I'm literally playing around with C minor tension 2 and 4 and sharp 4. And I can hold on to it even when it goes to F minor because it's still the same key and we're in a blues and I'm just playing bluesy ideas. So I'm kind of like hovering over the harmony. Like I'm related to it, but I'm not outlining anything. I'm not following the changes. I might be like, because I'm comfortable with the minor blues and these triads, like deeply comfortable, I might accentuate a certain note here or there that helps push it along a little bit more, but I'm not following tonalities or it's kind of like the right hand staying put while the left hand is moving. Like I recognize the left hand is moving, but my right hand is exactly in the same place. And we can ultimately, if you get good at playing like that, you can play over this whole tune just with C minor, including the C minor to F minor, back to C minor, and then the turnaround, even when it changes keys. If you get really confident and are willing to just like let your mojo hang, you could literally just play C minor over a whole chorus. And that can be a really fun way to mix things up. So maybe you want to be outlining changes, so to speak, playing tonalities, moving things around for a while. And then at a certain point, you might decide, you know what, if you're playing with a band, it's almost like you become a pedal, right? The musical idea of a pedal where one thing stays put while everything else is moving. So you could just play. It doesn't have to be complicated stuff. I should have saved this loop. Sorry, hold on 1 second. this over a loop sounds a little lame to me, especially because the rhythm was off, because I hate looping pedals. But if you could imagine like a Elvin Jones style drummer just like going to town behind you, and McCoy style pianist, like a really aggressive rhythm section behind you, it's fun to outline changes and to move through tonalities. But there are times when the energy gets really intense. I often feel like it's like surfing, and kind of the best thing you can do at that point, when like the rhythm section is just like this intense wave of energy pushing you. Sometimes the hippest thing to do is just let their energy drive everything, and you're just kind of like sitting there surfing it. Yeah, I mean, literally, you're just like standing still trying to balance while this thing pushes you. And then, 2 or 3 notes, 4 notes every now and then, maybe at the end of the chorus, when you start to the new one, move up a note in a quadratonic, something really simple that just keeps everything pushing and lets the rhythm section really provide the fun stuff. Yeah, I know our ideas can be very intellectual and academic and sound very advanced, and they can take us to that level, but they can also help us find the perfect notes when we're trying to do these real simple things. And you'll hear Coltrane play like that sometimes when the rhythm section's getting really intense. Not just John. I mean, a lot of great players, like, they'll just kind of grab onto like a really intense note and move around with 2 or 3 note themes while the rhythm section's just like pounding away behind them. It's a great effect. Stephen, yeah, I think you wrote that when I was playing the Rosenwinkel tune. It is a great tune. Sergio 655775. Yeah, that's way more realistic. So this is a great way to play this minor major 9. Obviously, it's an actual inversion. I think of it as having 2 different types of inversions. There's inversions like we talk about on guitar, because the fretboard is challenging to work on, and we don't have the 2 hands, and we don't have the vocabulary to think about and discuss the phenomenon that happens when we have 2 hands. So we often talk about triad or inversions like when you're just working with one structure. Right? These are our inversions, but these inversions can happen inside of other inversions. So a great example, to keep it even simpler, let's see what key. Yeah, so this is D major. I can play any of these inversions. Right? These are obviously inversions, but I can put them all over a D note, and then you could argue that they're inversions, or you could argue that I'm playing everything in root position. I could put all of these over. Probably should just use the open A string for this key. That's easier. So is this root position, second inversion, first inversion, or are these all second inversions? Because I have the 5th of the triad, the 5th of the chord underneath them. I could do all of these over an F sharp note. Maybe this might be a little tough. I might have to change this a little bit because guitar's weird. Right, so the same thing is true when we get advanced and we change the chord so that it's not just a D major triad over a D major, it's a D major triad over G minor 7, G minor major. So what you're doing is you're inverting the left hand, which is totally allowable. Right? We don't always have to have the root note underneath. It's a great sound to have. So one thing I might recommend for you for this voicing is mess around this isn't a necessity, but it's a good thing to be able to do if and when you need it or want it. Mess around playing the root note and then low note chord on top. You could even play root 5. Or just root. That was like a little bass melody. Just G minor tension 2. There's C minor. Here's F minor. There's B flat. That's nice. E flat. That's nice up there. A flat. Here's D flat. G flat. B. Here's E. I'm trying to decide if I want to do it down here. Let's try it down here because there's an open string and they're quirky. A. It's just like taking one thing you know and learning how to manipulate it ever so slightly. This is just organize, disrupt, organize, disrupt, organize, disrupt. Learn something, mess with it. All I'm doing is bringing a little bit more left hand into it. So again, the question is, are these root position inversions chords or are these first inversion chords? I don't know, to be honest with you. Your triad on top is obviously a root position, but your full voicing is obviously a first inversion. But if I play the root note before it and then move into it, like, I don't know which one it is. It's good to be able to hit the root when you need it because we need it a lot. Totally fine not to use it as long as it's done kind of tastefully, you know. Just something to think about. The other voicing that you shared in the underground, I've actually thought about adding that into the PDF because I do use that. I sometimes leave out the fifth because it's already on the second string. So this D note is already up here. So sometimes to make it easier, I leave it out, but it could be added in. You're right. It's an open triad with the quote unquote left hand, the root and third, or the root fifth and third added. I try to keep those examples as closed position triads anytime there's a way to play them closed position, because as soon as we open it, it's a little bit more advanced. People who might be new to our concept might have a hard time. Not everybody even knows what an open triad is. So I try to keep them closed, but there's nothing wrong with using open triads for these sounds. It's totally realistic and worth playing around with. I mean, listen to this one. Granted, this is in the key of E, so I have my open sixth string. What a great minor major 9 sound. And what is it? An open B major triad. Root underneath it. And third in the middle. It's the same thing you're talking about. It's just a different variation on it. And obviously, I'm putting it in E, so I have this note. But even if I wanted to move it to a different key, like let's say I wanted to play it in G, I would first find this shape in G, which is up here. Such a great sound. We got that half step down there. Then we got this nice big spacious interval on top of that, a minor sixth, and then another big spacious interval. So for me, once I find this shape, because I cannot play the root note at the same time, I'm going to go ahead and practice adding the root note. I missed the top note. There it is. This is very challenging. If you've only been with us for a couple months, once. I would not recommend even bothering wasting your time on this because you're probably just going to frustrate yourself. By all means, try it. But this is like several steps into the process. First, we're talking about adding a triad in the right hand with a shell voicing in the left hand, right? That alone confuses almost everybody that's new with us because we're trying to learn to think more like a piano player. Then we're applying that to the fretboard by putting the triad on top. Then we're taking the triad and we're making it open, which not everybody even knows what that means, but we're taking the middle note of the triad and either jumping it up an octave or jumping it down an octave. Either way, you get what we call an open triad. Then I'm adding the additional step of playing the root note and filling in the rest of the notes. I'd have to sit and actually really like shed this. I know this shape kind of well, but I don't know if I've ever run it through the circle fifths. Your version is much easier because it's all right here in this one shape. Not seeing any other questions. If anybody has any, let me know. I'm trying to remember what Dickie was asking about. Dickie had a similar question to you, Miguel, but not for the minor blues. So I don't see Dickie in here. But since we're almost out of time, I'm going to go ahead. The changes. There you are. I think that's the first time you've chimed in. What's up, man? I don't know if you were here earlier. I spent like half of this session, maybe even more, answering a similar question to Miguel, but you just got here. Cool. So I'm going to kind of go back over what I was talking about with Miguel because it's important information anyways, and I'm going to change it. So we're not going to talk about the minor blues. We're going to talk about Tenor Madness, right? And also just in general, the blues, not the minor blues. So as I pointed out to Miguel, there's basically two generic approaches I take. I'm going to start by talking about the simpler approach, which is as we get to know tonalities, we can just use them. Like if you know a dominant tonality, if you know a minor, if you know a major, if you see those types of chords and those harmonic functions in tunes, we can just apply what we already know. So this is kind of basing everything on the harmony of a tune. It's like thinking about what's the left hand of the imaginary piano player doing, and just whatever options we have here work. So a really easy starting point for this is something like what I talked about in the overview, that 5 steps to melodic improv, I think it was called. And that's the idea of using a root structure triad, which I believe Sean said is what he was doing in this video. So for Tenor Madness, it's a B-flat blues. So over B-flat, we're just going to use a B-flat major triad. Okay. We could theoretically use the tension flat 7. I'm not going to go into why that is right now. If we want to go more in depth, we only have about 5 minutes left. We can maybe bring it up at another open office hours, or we can do some one-on-one Skype stuff. There's a few different options for how to treat this chord, but my go-to is tension 2. If we just want a pure quadratonic, tension 2 is great. When we go to the 4 chord, same thing. I'm going to use the root structure triad, E flat, tension 2. Okay, so there's really not that much thinking going on here right now. I'm just playing whatever the chord is. I'm using that basic 1, 3, 5. That chord is my melodic triad, and then I'm just adding a tension 2 just to create some melodic movement. Here's our diminished chord. I'm going to stick with the E flat triad that I was just playing with a minute ago, but instead of tension 2, tension flat 2. This is an upper structure triad, but it's a very classic go-to diminished approach for me. I just step down a half step from the diminished root note and play major triad tension flat 2. So I'm playing E flat diminished, but my quadratonic is E flat. Some people might look at this and say that it's an E diminished major 7 or E tonic diminished, sometimes I hear it called, that it's just an arpeggio, E diminished with a major 7 in it. If we want to analyze it by the book, the music theory way, that's not necessarily wrong, but I'm using the E note as a tension note that wants to resolve down to the E flat note. The E flat note is much more in and consonant in my ear. Okay, that was just the E flat 7 and the E diminished back and forth a couple times. Same triad, tension 2 versus tension flat 2. The really cool thing about this is that if we compare this to a B flat blues, like if we keep in mind that we're playing a B flat blues, even though we're using E flat tension 2 and E flat tension flat 2, the tension 2 gives us what would be kind of like the fifth of a B flat blues scale. The tension flat 2 gives us the flat 5. It's our blue note. And the E flat note, that's our melodic note, gives us the 4. So we actually get this like it keeps the B flat blues present for us, even though we're not playing the blues scale. It's still there. Just an interesting little feature of thinking this way. This is just pure harmony. I'm not worried about looking at the melody yet. And then the last bit, I think I used a G tension flat 2 as the 6th chord, and then a C minor tension 2 as the 2 chord. And then I played around with an upper structure triad in that course over the F7. I think we used F13 flat 9, but you can, again, just use F major tension flat 2. There was really not too much fancy stuff happening. It doesn't mean that what I was playing is necessarily going to be easy for anyone, but hopefully you can see that I was just using 1-3-5 of the chord with a single tension note. And I kind of took all the thinking out of it by just using the basic 2, tension 2 for most of them, tension flat 2 for the diminished, and for the G7, because I wanted the sound of a G7 with a flat 9. If you have questions about that, we can talk about it another time when we have more than a minute left. But real quick, I wanted to go back to the other way that I mentioned to Miguel earlier about how I would look at this, which is to look at the melody and see what was Sonny doing, what was he hearing in his mind when he wrote Tenor Madness. It's not what I just played. There's actually some really hip stuff going on. As simple as that tune is, some really cool stuff that we can learn by looking at the melody. The first time I looked at the melody was early on in my melodic triad exploration, and it messed me up for a bit, because if you look at the first three notes, it's a G minor triad. So immediately I was like, oh, G minor triad, easy. Sonny's playing a G minor triad over B flat, which gives the sound of the Count Basie, right? Like a dominant with a 13, B flat 13. But it was, when I improvised, it just didn't sound like the tune. It sounded okay. It wasn't wrong. It just didn't sound perfect. Like, it's a cool sound, but it didn't sound like Tenor Madness to me, and I couldn't figure out why. He's just playing a G minor triad. Why doesn't it sound the same when I play G minor triad? And then I realized, I went back to my ears, and I thought about it, and I realized that the G note in his phrase is not stable. It's a tension note. It wants to go back to the B flat note. The B flat is the stablest note of them all. It's what I call melodic do. He does the same thing in the next measure, except with the D flat instead of the D natural. So what I realized was that it's not a G minor triad, it's a B flat major triad. And he's using the G note as tension 6, right? Which is my secondary tension, but still perfectly allowable. B flat tension 6. We could put tension 2 and tension 6, and we have a run-of-the-mill pentatonic scale. Right? Not everything has to be weird. Sometimes things work out perfectly normally. The next measure, he's not playing an E flat note, he's playing a D flat note. So this is not an E flat major triad in Sonny's ear. We can play it that way if we want to, but it won't fit the melody as he wrote it. You hear how the B flat note still sounds the most stable? So this is a B flat minor triad, tension 6. Okay, that's it. I would call that an E flat 9, because it puts the F natural in the melodic structure. Hear that tension? That's the major third of E flat, G, wanting to pull down to the 9. Such a cool sound. And while he's not playing this exact riff in his melody, he's implying this sound. So the melodic progression is B flat tension 6, B flat minor tension 6, and then back B flat major tension 6 again. Again, we can use tension 2 also if we want to. If we want to play that E diminished, E diminished is going to be a little quirky because there is no F natural note that works. We can't play. That doesn't work. So for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of gloss over this one, but I would find a different triad. maybe F sharp, tension flat 2. I'm not going to go into why right now because we just don't have the time. But it's 2 of the same 3 notes. That's the biggest thing. We could also go back and use E flat major, tension flat 2, because this, we could think of this D flat as a flat 7. There's a lot of things we could get into here. Like I said, there's a lot more going on in Tenor Madness than most people realize. When we get back to the one chord, now he's using tension 2 and tension 6, like I mentioned before, that we can do. So he's bringing in what to me is the primary tension note. We're allowed to change up the order. I'm just offering the ones that I think are best to start with when we talk about the primary versus the secondary tension notes. Now here, this is the hippest thing. I'm not sure how well you know this tune, Dickie, or anyone else that's still watching. This is the turnaround in, what is it, in bar 9. It's effectively outlining a chromatic descending line. C, B flat, A. Does that ring any bells? One way to think of this is it's minor major, C minor major. So what does that mean? That means over the first note, the C note, that's just a pure C minor. So like C minor tension 2 would be great over that. As soon as we get that note, we can either think of this as G7 as the dominant, or let's keep the C note in the left hand, C minor major 9. Now we're at C minor 7. So we could, to follow the melody, I would probably use an E flat triad here, because that gives us the flat 7, and then the minor 3rd and the 5th. It's just a go-to minor 7 tonality that I know works. If you're newer with us and you aren't following that, that's okay. You can rewatch this a few times. So this is the E flat tension 2. Then over F, we get to this A note. What's the melody doing there? Oh, and look at that, the melody over C minor has the G note in there also, so that's straight out of the E flat triad. There's really no melody over the F7 other than A, so we could use an F triad. Or we could get fancy and use a D major triad, give us the 13 flat 9. This one little tiny phrase is so fucking cool. It gives us this chromatic descending line that we can rip off. If you think about it, this whole thing, we could condense it down. It's just an F, like an F triad with a descending from the 5th to the 3rd. So we could theoretically stay within the context of the tune and just treat this whole section. We could treat that whole thing theoretically as just F. Or we could follow each note in the chromatic line and build triads and tonalities off of them. It moves fast, so you gotta like sit and loop that and work on that. But it's a really cool look at the possibilities within bar 9 and 10 of the blues. Once you know this, if you can play it over Tenor Madness, you can apply it to any other blues also. It's not only for Tenor Madness. You can apply it, in fact, really the chord progression, if you look at the real book, is just C minor to F7, right? So basically, if you can learn this in Tenor Madness, anytime you see a 2-5 that's 2 bars long, the 2 chord for a bar, the 5 chord for a bar, and then the 1, you can apply this concept to it, this harmonic melodic approach. Right, anywhere. Did you catch it? Body and soul. I'm just taking what I've just learned from Tenor Madness, putting it inside of a 2-5 in a totally different tune. This is like pretty advanced stuff. I shouldn't say it's advanced. It's challenging. Depending on where you are in your journey, this might feel like it's a couple of years in front of you, a couple of months, a couple of days. I don't know. Everyone's in a different position, but I'm just trying to show the really amazing things that happen when we kind of take some time to just look at a melody of a tune, like the great tunes, and just sit with it for a little while and ask ourselves, what's really happening here? What was Sonny hearing in his mind when he wrote that? Like, what a simple little riff, but why does it sound so cool? And how else can we play off of it? What can we learn from it? What triads, what notes are stable? To me, the stability is that chromatic line. Everything else can be thrown away, theoretically. I don't want to, but... And then what happens with that chromatic, those stable points, if I put them over the left hand? Right? What is that implying? This stuff is endless. That's why it's so important to stick with the fundamentals, learn to be in command of the basics, and learn to be playful with it. It's not about memorizing tons of riffs. It's about learning to see the steel frame behind everything and getting really comfortable with it, and then learning to just be like a little kid with it and just run around and swing from it and hang things from it and climb it and jump off of it. And, you know, it's just becoming creative and awake and playful with the little things, the simple things. Hope this was helpful. We're a couple minutes over. I got to run, and I haven't seen any other new questions coming in, so hopefully that's cool. If anybody needs any help with anything, I've started adding a little blue button at the top if you want to set up like a one-on-one lesson, if you want to dig in deeper and be able to like talk back to me and ask follow-up questions. You can hit that up. We will be doing, I think next weekend we're off. I actually have a family wedding next weekend, so I think we're back the following weekend, and we'll have 2 different sessions. We're going to do the group class and the open office hours, and then another one a week after, another group class. Yeah, cool. This was a good one. Thank you for all the questions. Thanks for hanging with me on a Sunday. Sean, I can't believe you're still with us. It's like 1 a.m. there. Sergio, you're welcome. Stephen, yeah, likewise. It was great hanging. Miguel, you're welcome. Sean, you're welcome. Paul, great to see you on here. We need to catch up again soon. Brian, thank you. I owe you some feedback that's coming soon. I'm going to try and get to that today. Dickie, you're welcome. Yeah, thanks for hanging, everybody. Happy practicing. Keep hitting it hard. Keep things simple and playful. And I will see you guys soon. Take care.